All right. So, welcome. We have a special guest with us today for Latin Business Today and the Sports Business Institute. A young man by the name of Anthony Pardo. Anthony, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Why don't you tell us a little bit? I know you're with Major League Baseball. We'll get into that in a second. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your background, education, things like that.
Yeah. So grew up in Brooklyn, New York, which is coincidentally where I still reside today, and can't get enough of it. I went to St. John's University, so spent a few years in Queens, and then came back to Brooklyn. And while at St. John's, I majored in journalism with a minor in sports management. And then, soon after that, or pretty much upon graduation, I ended up at MLB pretty quickly after that. So yeah.
The journalism major is very interesting to me, and I looked at your background on LinkedIn, and you have some writing experience.
Yeah.
I run a master's degree program in sport business management at Manhattan College, and one of the things we tell our students is, writing is still very important. And I have a young son who's 22 years old and the daughter, and it's like I try to explain to them, yeah, I understand you need to get everything into your character fit, for your tweet stuff, but you still need to be able to write, succinct and clearly. Have you found that the writing has helped you in your career?
Yeah. I would even go as far as saying in a lot of ways, it prepared me for this position at MLB, just coincidentally in how, my career turned out. While I was in college, obviously majoring in journalism, I don't want to date myself too much, but that was around 2005, 4, around there. I ended up writing for New York Newsday, which is a paper I think you're familiar with, and had about 50 bylines or so across some sports and general assignment. It was a really wonderful experience. And look, any college student, if you're able to get an internship or a part-time in your ultimate field, is paramount. It's what you're striving for, right? And coincidentally, I think the two things I learned out of that was, one, just how to continue to strengthen your writing skills and navigating that, because when you're writing, you're working also with editors who are, they're the grammar police, right? So they're behind you. So you're recording this right now, right? So if you're going to write it up later, you go back, you listen to the quotes, then you try to type it up, and, quote versus, storytelling, right? Navigating the story. So for me, the writing was a real interesting experience about learning how to write, and learning also how an editor tries to correct your writing, because it's not so much about, let me just get the story and put it out there. It's also learning, how do you do the next story better? How do you write the next story better? And some of that is, applied to learning along the way, working with editors, learning what the flow or the tone or the voice of the piece should be.
Right.
So again, I think that in itself was one thing, that couple of skill sets that I learned there. And then ultimately my current role, which we'll talk about, shortly,
Yep.
I'm doing corporate partnerships. I'm doing completely different vertical from traditional journalism. And certainly business writing is very different. But at the end of the day, I always like to say that experience, once you learn how to write, as your career evolves, you can write about anything. It's just a matter of over time, just adapting and learning how to write in the different verticals that you're in. I'd also say that for me, coincidentally, again, alluding to the time of 04, 05, that was a time where we did not know where journalism was going to go. We did not know where sports journalism was going to go. And, you work on a beat with the Times and the Daily News and the Post, and all these guys are like, you got to get away. You're young, don't do it. We don't know where this is going. Everything's going digital, so on and so forth. And certainly, again, never would have predicted, platforms like Latin Biz, right? This is the new forum for journalism today, right? And Twitter, can't tell you how much, especially in sports, Twitter has become so key and important to all the journalists today, telling their stories, promoting their stories, driving people their stories, and putting into apps and whatnot. So again, as a young kid in 2005, very scared off a little bit, and enjoyed the experience, but definitely through that experience said, you know what? Maybe the sports writing isn't necessarily where I wanted to go, and maybe I wanted to stay in sports or get into sports in a different vertical. And then as fate would have it, I ended up, at baseball.
Yeah. It's a good, and there's a lot of good nuggets in there of advice for people too, because I think writing is one of those skills. The more you do, the better you get, and if you're conscious about it, like you were, you will get better at it. So let's drop back a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your background as a sports person growing up.
Yeah, so I think growing up, I like most kids, love sports, especially when you live in New York. It's, we like to think in many ways it's a sports capital across, all the pro sports teams. And, to take it back a step, grew up loving baseball and basketball and football and all the sports and hockey. And, my family came to New York in, gosh, I want to say it was like 1967, they immigrated from Ecuador. Okay. So they came here with my brother, who was, 2 or 3 at the time. And, you're coming to New York in 1967 from a foreign country. And, in Ecuador and South America, soccer is really big. So definitely that was still an important part of, like, for my father and some of his other family that came here, they love soccer. But then you're starting to adapt to American sports. You come to New York in 1967, 68, you get to 69, and what happens? The Mets win the World Series, the Jets win the Super Bowl, the Knicks win the NBA title, and coincidentally, what happened to me, I end up, getting handed down that fandom because those are the first teams that were winning in New York, and there was a lot of buzz. So I grew up as a kid rooting for all 3 of these teams, right? And, have gone up and down and stayed loyal through the successful years and the non-successful years. And still really love, sports in that regard. And that was a big part of me growing up, playing baseball since I was 8 years old, which was definitely my favorite sport, on par with basketball. Basketball is not very good. Baseball, I was much better. So stuck with it, played varsity baseball, played, even while I was in college, played in some, rec leagues and whatnot. And then, also did cross country and track in high school, like typical, athlete, doing a couple of different a couple of different, sports while I was in school. So sports has been a huge part of my life, and definitely, like, growing up in New York, being a fan, like, as a kid, you're a teenager, it's like the Mets going to World Series and Mike Piazza, and one of my favorites of all time, Edgardo Alfonso, right? One of the greatest Latin players in New York sports history. And then, the Knicks were so great in the 90s growing up, Patrick Ewing, John Starks, Allen Houston, Larry Johnson, like those are really my 2 favorite teams and still are today. Really, really enjoyed that. And that was a big part of my growing up, but also impacting why I probably wanted to be a sports writer going into college, because I just loved sports so much and was around it that I was like, this might be the career I want to go to.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's, it's funny because, obviously I laughed a little bit when you said you were dating yourself. I mean, I went to college in the 80s and 90s. So, but I actually, I did live, I was alive when the Mets won in 69. I wasn't that old, but I was alive, and the Jets, and these are all my teams too, and the Knicks, and of course for me, the Islanders, because I grew up on Long Island. But,
sure.
I feel bad, my son is 22 and he roots for all the teams, that I root for. I'm like, when he was younger, I'm like, you don't have to root for my teams. And I was trying to talk him out of it because I just don't, it's such a torturous thing sometimes, but that's being a fan. So right. you go to St. John's, do some sports writing or and get some skill sets. And then, tell me about the MLB position, what prepared you for it, how it came about and all that.
So, as I alluded to before, right, majoring in journalism, kind of figured after that experience, again, have these bylines, great experience, understand what it's like, kind of wanted to pivot. And, I went on to graduate, and one piece of advice I'd always give to people is like, especially today, no one should feel that if you majored in one thing, you can't pivot to do something else. I think that sometimes is a very big misconception amongst young people. I'm majoring in business, so I have to go into business. Sometimes your major is not necessarily what you end up doing in your career. There's so many people that happens to, right? So I think for me, it was like, okay, I want to stay in sports. And that was my minor, sports management, which at the time was still a very, like, a budding discipline in colleges. It still hadn't flushed out the way it is today, where there's full, degrees and bachelor's in sports management and master's programs, so on and so forth. So post college, I ended up working for a nonprofit for a little bit called Management Leadership for Tomorrow, which is a great nonprofit, really, that works to help Latinos and Black professionals, young professionals who are already working. They want to go to top business schools. This is a great program to help coach you to get into top 25 business schools. And then they also had a internship program for students of color already in school, junior, senior year in undergrad, who want to get these internships. And one of their partners at the time happened to be MLB. And while I was working there, I made, a contact, which is a big thing, right, is networking. So I networked and made a contact who was an alumni of their program. And he happened to also be at the time the director of recruitment at MLB. And, I want to get into sports. And I'm like, oh my God, this is baseball. This might be an awesome opportunity. And, networked with him. And he said, here are the opportunities we have available right now. And, at that time, the only one the only open position was a role in our office operations team. And I took it. I applied and interviewed and got the role. And I think that was, as fate would have it, that was probably the best opportunity I could have ever asked for, in order for me to really understand the organization. Again, noting what I said before about pivoting from journalism, want to get into sports, but really don't know what I want to do. In this role, I interacted with practically everyone in the league office and learned about what they did, what the composition of the varying business functions were. And this role ultimately, really afforded me the opportunity to make tons of relationships, network with tons of people. Again, the role was centered on delivering mail and doing reception work. So again, you're really touching every group of the organization. And it was really a phenomenal opportunity for me to really understand things that, as a fan, you don't think about what special events does or what licensing does. Like you go to Modell's or Dick's Sporting Goods and you see all this apparel, but you don't think about how it got onto that rack and all the various things that had to happen before to get it there, right? So again, great opportunity. And then after a year in that, I, got an opportunity to apply for a role on our marketing and advertising team. And I was very fortunate to get that position, and spent 3 years working on our cause-related marketing campaigns. So our community relationships, right? Like Boys and Girls Club, Jackie Robinson Day, right? Mother's Day and Father's Day are partnerships with, Susan G. Komen and things like that at the time. And people probably have seen the pink wristbands, blue wristbands. So that was a really interesting thing to work on, because it's such an important part of who MLB is. And then the other part of the role was working on our brand advertising, which I always laugh, because at the time, a few years after college, again, noting back to what I said before, not knowing where we were going to go in journalism, right? With print media moving more online, traditional marketing, buying advertising in newspapers and magazines and promoting, our World Series, the All-Star Game, opening day, our big events through newspapers and TV buys and things like that, well before we really started getting to a digital space. So I did that for about 3 years. And then after that, I moved into a role in our corporate partnerships team, where I've spent, this is, I think, my 10th year on the corporate partnerships team. And the role has very much evolved for me. Ever since, that's kind of been my story at baseball. So coming up on 15 years in the organization, and 3 different departments and 3, in many ways, different roles, albeit this role where I'm in currently has evolved over the, 10 years or so I've been on this team in particular.
Great, Anthony. Again, we're with Anthony Pardo. He is with Major League Baseball. And Anthony, one of your key stakeholders clearly is the ownership, team owners. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with them. How does that work?
So, for us, we don't really have immediate interface with team owners per se. I think the better way to understand it is, our key stakeholders are the teams. We support the teams. We work with all 30 clubs, and I have colleagues at, similar levels to mine that I work with. So I'm not immediately working on the ownership level or, with the ownership level per se. I'll use that to kind of springboard into explaining a little bit more what my daily responsibilities now are today. So as director of partnership activation on our sponsor team, I oversee our day-to-day management of some of our key league partnerships. So Gatorade, Budweiser, Lysol, Google, just a couple of those. And then I also oversee a few of our media partnerships across MLB.com and MLB Network. So to elaborate a little bit more, our league partnerships, think of it as those brands like Gatorade and Budweiser, long-standing partners. They are MLB partners. They are, as part of their deal, they are getting digital rights and TV rights to be on our network and .com and other digital channels, but they're also essentially the partnership is based on the IP rights that they're getting, the use of the silhouetted batter logo and connecting the two brands together. We then have another layer of partners that we work with. Sometimes I guess you can say we compete with, a CBS Sports or whoever it might be, right? So we get media partnerships, brands who just want to buy some media on MLB Network, on MLB.com, heavy on our MLB.TV platform, which is, our live streaming games. So I work on some of those, and then kind of to what I was alluding to before on the 30 clubs, we work with our 30 clubs on the digital rights that they have with their partners. So think of it again as, if the Yankees cut a Budweiser deal in the New York market, we get tapped in to help them when Budweiser wants to do stuff on Yankees.com. So that's what my team does, and I help oversee. We have a team of about 20 or so coordinators or managers that I help oversee. And then the last part of my role is also helping oversee our jewel event activation. So what we do at All-Star Week or during the postseason. So think of it as anything from, the sponsor signage you might see during those key events to helping get the Chevy vehicle on the field when the Chevy MVP is presented, post All-Star Game or World Series.
Excellent. Clearly MLB embraces, diversity and that's awesome. In fact, next week I'm going to be talking to a gentleman by the name of Roy Silver. Doesn't sound Latino, but he is. Roy's actually vice president with the Texas Rangers, and he was a very good baseball player out of Long Island and played down in Florida. I think he may have been on a Major League Baseball roster too. But he's a great guy, and we're going to talk to Roy next week. But tell us about your experiences regarding, Latinos specifically in the front office, growing the fan base to the Latino community, because it seems like, obviously, listen, I told you when I grew up, even though I'm a Mets fan, one of my favorite players of all time was Roberto Clemente. And I still remember to this day, my dad coming in and telling me that he was killed in a plane crash and just being devastated by that. And I mean, talk about great players, but talk a little bit about that.
Right.
And are you bilingual? I assume you are. I mean,
Yes. Yeah. To answer your question and talk a little bit about it. So in addition to the day job I just described at baseball and the career I've had there, one of the things I actually took on over the last year and is really important to how baseball is reaching or embracing diversity, not just from a Latino perspective, but from just diversity, equity, and inclusion as a whole. I also currently serve as the co-president of our Latinx Business Resource Group, or for, employee resource group. Obviously, a lot of organizations have it. Ours is called Somos, which is We Are. So MLB implemented BRGs about 3 or 4 years ago, I want to say. And, the mission of these BRGs is to create relevant programming to, geared at employees to optimize the employee experience at the league office and, also serve as a focus group, if you will, for any business function in the organization who's trying to target the Latinx audience, specific to my group. But we have, a Latinx or Latino BRG, Black professionals, and LGBTQ and Asian professionals, women group, working parents. So we have a ton of BRGs. We have a military one. So again, MLB is really trying to, from internally outward, right, embrace diversity, grow diversity, and and has done a great job. And as these BRGs have grown over the years, I've definitely been, witness to it in this role. I would also say, in terms of, other Latinos in the front office, part of us embracing this Latino community, in addition to the BRG's role is to be a resource, for other Latinos in the organization. There's more than 15% of the central office is made up of Latinos. So again, the goal of the BRG is really to help them to network with others in other disciplines in the organization, kind of similar to my first role, right? Is connect people in, ad operations with someone in finance, and continue to network. It's all about helping with professional development, if you will. And again, some of the things we try to do to promote professional development and exposure to some of the things that we do and the other people in different roles in the organization. And while we continue to grow from diversity, and the BRGs are helping to affect how we grow to our fan base. And definitely, I think from the Somos end, we're definitely trying to play a small role in how we reach the Latino community. I think you probably know, as a baseball fan, and talking about Clemente, roughly 30% of our players today are Latino. So, we're always looking as a league to highlight those young stars now, in particular, especially the Latin stars, but all of our young stars, across our media platforms and our marketing campaigns as we move forward. And Somos plays a role. Again, it could just be as simple as like, hey, we're thinking of doing this campaign, this commercial in Spanish, right, with our players. What should be the name of the campaign? This is the thematic, right? And then I'll give you one little story also to kind of wrap this one up, because you mentioned Clemente. One of the things we did last year that we were really proud of, we held a conversation during Hispanic Heritage Month. Given what's gone on in our country the last year, and the social injustice that has gone on in the conversation, MLB, I think, has become a leader, has been a leader, but continues to try to push the envelope to be a leader in having these tough conversations, and trying to be a leader as a league, both outward and internally. So one of the conversations Somos led was a conversation on colorism in baseball. And by colorism, it was specifically focused on the Afro-Latino experience, because a lot of people don't think about that experience, to your point, that a Roberto Clemente experience, identifying as Afro-Latino. People might default and assume he's Latino, but in fact, he identifies as Afro-Latino. He's Black Latino. And we did a phenomenal panel discussion with Roberto Clemente Jr., so his son, Francisco Lindor, who was with the Indians at the time. He's with the Mets now. And we also had a great historian and writer, Adrian Burgos Jr. And we also had Jennifer Mercedes from La Vida Baseball. You're familiar. And this was a tremendous conversation, really trying to educate employees and continue to have these dialogues about, hey, what we're seeing right now and some of the issues that have really sprung in terms of race conversations. It's been very prevalent in the Latino communities in ways that people don't experience. One of the stories that was talked about was how when Roberto came up and was playing the league, again, this is a Hall of Famer and 3,000 hits, but he broke into the league about 7-8 years after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. And Roberto would, similar to Black players, have to eat on the bus when the team was on the road and couldn't eat in the restaurant. And there's stories about that, right? Because he wasn't white like his other teammates. And, the race issue was going on then was, also affecting Afro-Latinos or dark-skinned Latinos. And I think this was a really important conversation that we were able to help host and have this critical dialogue. And I think overall, this is, again, part of our efforts to contribute to the organization, continue to have these conversations, to continue to educate and continue to engage employees on these conversations, because that's the only way as a whole, both as an organization and as a country, we move forward. So again, I brought that up just because, you touched on Clemente, and that was one of, the more successful things we were able to accomplish from the BRG perspective.
Yeah, very important and very critical information, Anthony, and I appreciate you sharing that. And then the end of the day is, for me, it's 2021, and I'm older than you, but it's mind-boggling to me, that we are still, kind of on an uphill climb with this, but hopefully we're getting to a better place. So thanks
Yeah.
again for sharing that. And let's talk a little bit about, because I'm very concerned about, when I was a kid and I grew up on Long Island, and we were always out on fields. And if we weren't in the fields, we were in the streets. We were playing wiffle ball. We were playing, if we had four guys, then the right side of the infield was out of play. So we were always playing the game, and it brings a tear to my eye when I drive, and especially on a beautiful spring day, and I drive past an empty field and nobody's on it. What can you tell me, in terms of the health of the game, in terms of, getting people, younger fans involved in playing the game, what's being done to grow the game?
Yeah. So in terms of younger fans, that's obviously very paramount for us. As a league, our goals are always, one of our goals will always be to continue to grow the game and continue to reach that younger demographic, that younger audience. From a social standpoint, we are always engaging our fans and hopefully that young audience, and we are seeing those numbers, with content that really highlights exciting moments and our young stars. So, and coincidentally, Acuna and Tatis and Lindor and Soto, but then also, Mike Trout and Bellinger and Yelich. That's pivotal for us to try to capture these exciting moments and highlight these young stars in highlights, because that's what young people consume now. They love being on their phones, on social media, consuming highlights, off our different social handles that we have. From my day-to-day job, we always are tapping into our partners to align themselves with this content across, social channels or across MLB.com or wherever, because we know they're going to be able to help us tell that narrative and reach that audience. I think I mentioned before MLB.TV, which is, really I would like to say one of our biggest, if not our biggest platform, where we try to reach everyone from that perspective. We bring games to fans on their preferred devices. Again, people are watching games on their phones, on their tablets, more than ever. So OTT streaming has been very key as well on, streaming platforms. So we're trying to build out that experience in MLB.TV where they're able to, get those games. And our partners are also constantly having a presence in the product. So they're reaching millions of fans during a period when, especially over the last year, fans are streaming games at an all-time high. Additionally, I'd add some of the other content that we did, which kind of launched last year, that we found really successful. We started branching out and doing more on YouTube, and we created original YouTube content series that were very player focused. Again, getting to know some of our players, whether it's off the field or it was content series focused on players on the field. Our YouTube content series saw 81% of its viewers were 34 or under. So putting out content like this on a platform like YouTube, where that younger demographic is going to consume it, that just created another vertical where our sponsors can have a seat at the table, but also be a vehicle to help us continue to reach a younger audience. I think one of the examples that I worked on in particular was, one of the first of its kind. We mic'd up Pete Alonso of the Mets and had a YouTube series, which was really fun and really funny, and got to know, the side of the game of what happens when people get to first base and what conversations go on between players and runners. And it's pretty funny. And it was presented by Gatorade. So we were able to get a sponsor to back it. And it was a good synergy there. So again, we're going to hopefully look to continue to do those and pull out more of those this year and beyond. And then really, I think one of the last things I would say is probably our play ball program, our play ball initiative that we do that basically overarching is our focus to reach young fans at the youngest age, right? Play ball basically is our initiative to get people to play ball, whether it's your local, little league, or whether it's a baseball clinic in your local town. And we host a ton of those throughout the year from our youth programs and development team. And that's been a great opportunity where we've been able to reach the youngest of baseball fans, at 3 or 4, all the way up to high school, and leading into, adulthood. And again, another area where we've had tons of our partners get behind us and help us in different ways, get that message out or support play ball across the country and really try to engage that younger audience. So I think, to your point, we're definitely very focused on that as much as we can. And we definitely are, trying to navigate a lot of different verticals to try to reach this young audience and continue to grow to reach that younger demographic.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And just a couple more questions and we'll let you go. Obviously, one of the things I want to share with you is I do run a master's degree program in sport business management at Manhattanville College, not far from the city, obviously, here in Purchase, New York. And you have an open invitation, hopefully soon when we can all get back together to come speak. We have had many Major League Baseball executives on campus, including Rob Manfred, by the way. So
love that.
Let's talk.
That would be great.
Yeah, love to have you. So let's talk a little bit. Hopefully this is the last time we have to bring it up, in one of these platforms, and is, the challenges of COVID-19, obviously, and great, obviously that you were able to get through a shortened season last year, hopefully a full season this year, and hopefully, we're seeing New York's going to bring some fans back. Hopefully we'll start seeing fans in the stands again. But what's the how is MLB approaching the 2021 season with this in mind, COVID?
We successfully navigated a shortened season, as you know, in 2020 during the pandemic. And certainly I think from that, we took some key approaches that helped us complete that season, but that we can implement for this year. I think to your point, hopefully this is the last time we're talking about the pandemic as the country tries to move forward and is starting to make progress. So, given what we learned last year, look, health and safety is paramount, of course, for us. We are, as a league, continuing to, we're building out protocols that we used last year that we're trying to, build off of and do more of. And what we've learned, what other leagues have learned as well, in terms of trying to keep everyone safe and keep the players on the field and keep the game going. And obviously we're really excited that we're on schedule for a full 162. Again, last year was just a little bit unpredictable, and we were glad we were able to get, the 60-game season in and a really exciting, postseason. From my end, even one of the exciting partnerships I got to work on last year was Lysol, bringing them on board right in time for the postseason bubble. And you can't talk about a more timely partnership than Lysol and a brand that we were able to work with to help enforce some of these, safety protocols and cleaning, which is, not just for baseball, but paramount now everywhere for everyone. So again, I think for us, it's most important to know that, we're looking forward to a full 162 game. Obviously with fans slowly returning to the ballpark in different markets as permitted. So that's definitely exciting. And we're seeing, even some spring training games have been sold out already with the limited capacity. So again, progress as a country, and certainly baseball is helping kind of tell that narrative in that way. That's a good sign. I would think another challenge or some of the challenges we're going to work through, from a media and partnerships perspective. Last year, we implemented a lot of new elements in 2020 because instead of 162 games, there were only 60, and we had an expanded postseason, which was great. But again, we learned a lot of things in a shortened season that we are going to hopefully be able to implement this year and carry over. Things like, we added virtual signage and broadcast. You probably noticed behind the pitcher's mound, there was logos. That's a great opportunity for partners that was, not existent before 2020. And again, we got really creative and trying to figure out new ways to, highlight and leverage our partnerships despite lesser games. So I think those are one of the things that actually from the challenge of last year, we're learning to try to implement this year. And again, it just provides our partners with additional exposures that they lost during the shorter season. So we're looking to kind of keep that this year. And, we're still discussing our overall approach for the 2021 season. It's kind of a moving target, but at the end of the day, we're really excited about having a full season. And I think if we learned anything from last year, we're going to be able to navigate this and, get through 2021. And, again, ring the bell on April 1st, or sorry, I should know what day opening day is. It's April 1st, I believe, March 31st. And, close the bell. I think we have our game 7 of the World Series would be scheduled for October 31st. So we're looking forward to having that wire to wire and just navigating things as they come and figuring out our approach.
Yeah, well, let me just say on behalf of, from a fan perspective and from a human perspective, because I think everybody's got to have balance in their life, right? But I think the fact that the MLB was able to play, and also this goes for the NFL too, and the NHL, because we're big Islander fans in this house, and watching the NHL play over the summer in the bubble up in Canada was, I mean, these are outlets for people, right? I mean, there's a lot of people suffering, whether it's depression, and I don't mean to go down this road, but the point is,
Sure.
you guys have a product that people want to consume. They love it. There's a passion for it. A lot of people, it's in their DNA, like me, but it's great to know, that you guys are really there and you're trying to put out the product that we all know and love. So I'll just say thank you, to you guys and to what you're doing. Before I let you go, just a couple more questions, Anthony.
Yeah.
One is very important to me, obviously, as somebody who's running a sport management program and trying to help people who, like you, maybe 5, 10, 15 years ago were getting their career going. What are your recommendations for, how, those interested in working in sports?
Great question. Patience and networking. Those would be the 2 items I would share with any young person. I would even take that beyond sports. It's probably in any vertical, but definitely in sports. Being patient as you search for opportunities in the industry, and being patient in knowing that your opportunity will present itself if you approach this with this like hard-working, grinding mentality, right? It's a grind, to especially when you're first trying to get an opportunity, whether it's an internship, a part-time, or a full-time. So, prepare yourself for the grind, but be patient with it. Like, the right opportunity always presents itself at the right time, and never giving up on that. So patience, networking. I think I talked about it before. So much of my early career was navigated through networking. Networking, that is how you can best break into sports in so many other disciplines as well. But in sports in particular, is being open to making new contacts and meeting new people, and building, building and
Okay. Let's so we're continuing here with Anthony Pardo. We thank him for his time, and he's here. Anthony is director of partnership activation for Major League Baseball. Anthony, we're talking about helping, kind of giving advice to students who are interested in working in sports. Can you continue on that? Let's see, maybe I lost him again.
You have me? I'm back.
Yep, go ahead.
I can hear you.
Go ahead. So yeah, why don't you just continue where you left off about, talking about helping people understand what it's like to get you to pursue a job in sports.
Yeah, I could start from the top again. So, patience and networking, those are the 2 items. Being patient as you search for opportunities in the industry, and knowing that your opportunity presents itself when it's supposed to, so long as you approach it with, making sure you work hard and you grind and you just stay patient and keep doing what you got to do to get that opportunity. And then networking. Networking, this is how you can best break into sports, being open to making new contacts, meeting new people, and building and cultivating those new relationships. It's not just like, hey, I'm networking because I want to meet someone at this company or this one, and then, parlay that into someone who might know of an internship or a job. You want to cultivate relationships. It's super important also in my immediate vertical, right? In sponsorships, I manage a bunch of different partnerships, and I love all of the clients that I work with and all the agencies that they work with. Again, everyone's so passionate about what they're doing and trying to bring, X brand together with, a MLB, or, if you work in sports in general, X brand working with X league or property, right? So it's cultivating those relationships, not just with clients, but also internally. Cultivate relationships with other people in legal, in marketing, in office operations, finance, so on and so forth. Networking is really something that should help any young person try to get where they're going. And at the end of the day, especially in sports, this is a small industry, and it has a strong network. Everyone pretty much knows everyone. You learn as time goes on, or everyone's kind of connected to everyone, regardless of what sport you're in. So I think that's an important thing to note is make sure to do your networking. Never feel afraid to, send an email or reach out to a person on LinkedIn. More often than not, I know it's cold calling in many ways, but more often than not, if you don't know someone or you are connected to someone, the person you connect with will respond. They will connect with you. They will talk to you. And again, prioritize cultivating their relationship. Don't just leave it high and dry. Make sure you check in every few months and you cultivate that over time. So many of the people I networked with earlier in my career have become mentors, have become friends, strong professional colleagues. And again, that's what this industry is all about. It's, like I said, super close knit, super small. So networking is very, very important if you want to break into sports, and never be afraid to network and meet new people and build those relationships over time, because you never know when they will help you or you can help them, which I think is the other side of the coin. So any young people, being patient with the process and networking to get where you're going.
Excellent advice. Anthony, I thank you for your time. Anthony Pardo at Major League Baseball. Please keep in touch, and as you just mentioned, if there's anything we can do for you, don't hesitate to reach out, buddy.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.